Hey, Julio.
There you go. How's it going, Jen?
Good.
All right, so you're going to be sharing the screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Want to give everybody a couple minutes?
Yeah. Well,
All right.
hang on. Looks like we've got folks starting to join in the waiting room. So
Okay.
I'm gonna share my screen so that way we've got something up while people come in.
All right. I'm just going to mute myself for one moment.
Sure. Good morning. This is Jen from Augusta Home Care Recruiting. We are going to get started at around 11. Probably give folks just a couple minutes to file in. And should be a pretty intimate group today. So we'll be looking forward to any questions that anybody has as we get started. And yeah, so just hang tight, grab your coffee or your water or your tea or whatever it may be, and we will get started soon. Just giving folks a few minutes to join in. So, hey, everyone, if you just arrived, this is Jen from Augusta Home Care Recruiting. We're going to get started in just another couple minutes here, just giving folks a couple more minutes to file in and grab their coffee or their tea or whatever beverage you prefer. So, yeah, just hang tight. We'll get started here in just a minute. Awesome. So it is just a minute after the hour. So I think we're going to go ahead and jump in. And as people come in, they can catch up. We organize this specifically as a pretty interactive way to have a online training event on the topic of retention practices, culture, and caregiver recruitment with the Briones Consulting Group. So hopefully we will get folks asking questions along the way or at the end. That's the intention here. So hopefully we can have an awesome discussion. And yeah, so we'll start things off by kind of introducing the topic here and Julio and myself. And I'll get my camera on as well, so that way you can see what I look like. If I can. There we go. Awesome. Hey, everyone. So yeah, as I said, we're going to be talking about retention practices, culture, caregiver recruitment. And let me go ahead and get your brain on this topic. So People work for money, but they go the extra mile for recognition, praise, and rewards. That's a Dale Carnegie quote. If you're not familiar with him and you haven't ever read How to Win Friends and Influence People, can't recommend it enough. But it's true, and it's at the essence of what we're going to talk about today. So first off, I want to introduce Julio, who is the other person on the video right now. So Julio is a business consultant specializing in senior care growth and concentrating on private pay home care. He works with senior care facilities, home care, home health, and hospice agencies to create custom strategies to enhance their offerings, streamline recruitment and operations, and optimize their territory or service area with using existing resources and data. He, with a keen understanding of the industry and broad professional background, Julio has developed methods that challenge the status quo while incorporating traditional methods and concepts. His years of experience with independent owners, franchisees, corporate entities ensures that he has the solution for your organization. So I'm so glad to have met Julio. He brings such a depth of experience in senior care, and has a really, really impressive set of skills here to share with us and background and knowledge. So yeah, Julio, super excited to have you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to doing this with you today.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'm Jen. So I've been a startup sales and business development leader for 13 years in the senior care industry. I got my start as a professional caregiver in a memory care community. And following that, I've helped build two successful caregiver training and certification businesses, the Institute for Professional Care Education, also known as OnCourse Learning, and Care Academy. And so now I'm a co-founder and the chief recruiter at Augusta, and we are helping to tackle the biggest challenge for senior care operators out there, recruiting enough qualified caregivers. So at Augusta, what we do is we tap into a new pool of qualified caregivers through social media, and we take all the stress and hassle out of figuring out social media and how to turn it into qualified applicants for you. So yeah, that's just a little bit about us. And I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Julio.
All right. So first, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. And now, the purpose of this webinar today is to kind of walk you guys through and help you understand a little bit about how does culture go hand in hand with retention and recruitment. So one of the things that I personally hold near and dear to my heart is company culture. And just to briefly define it for those of you that may not, may have your own definition or may have heard of what culture is but don't understand, it's the shared beliefs and values established by a leader that's communicated, demonstrated, and reinforced. So that's a really fancy way of saying you gotta walk the walk, and talk the talk. All right. So if you are an owner of a home care agency, you have to understand what your beliefs are. Where do you see your company going? What do you value is important? Are you a person who's client driven? Are you profit driven? Are you driven for the care? What is it that matters to you? What's your why? Once you understand that, you'll be able to trickle that down, and your staff immediately in the office will understand this. Your caregivers will see it because they'll see you live it. Okay. So this, as it says here, it'll shape that perception, it'll shape behaviors, and it'll just get that whole team on board. And if everybody understands and believes in your vision and understands what you want the culture to be, it'll translate all the way down and ultimately improve on your recruitment process and your ability to retain employees. Retention starts before you even hire people. Okay. And company culture is a big part. You want to add in something, Jen?
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. One of the things that I've noticed that successful home care agency owners are incorporating into their culture is making sure that it's apparent from the get-go. If caregivers don't understand about your culture from the very moment they look at your application, even the job posting, um, then you're potentially setting up different expectations for that caregiver than what the reality is. So I think that's another reason why creating a company culture that's um, ubiquitous and really just throughout all aspects of your business is incredibly important. So yeah, that's great.
All right, go ahead. All right. So as we were talking about, I'm also a big believer in that, most of the time, I don't think an agency has a huge recruitment problem, but they have a retention problem. And some facts that are a little bit scary at times to think about. Retention is designed to help reduce employee turnover. And right now, we've been steady for a couple of years, according to HHA Exchange and a couple of other data providers out there, 65.2% annual turnover. And more than 50% of your caregivers aren't even making it to the end of the 30 days. Now that sounds like a big number, and some of you are probably sitting out there going, yeah, if he's right, it's actually much bigger than 50%. And some of you are going, well, I'm not even seeing close to 50%. There's a lot involved in this, and a lot of it has to do with what happens during your onboarding process. So there's a lot in here, but if you're losing 50% of your workforce within the first 30 days, this really talks about a problem that you're having internally. And we're going to get to some of this stuff later on in the webinar. But the biggest impact to your particular business is what the cost of recruitment, hiring, onboarding, training, new caregivers comes into play. All right. And, I think Home Care Pulse puts this average at about $2,600 per caregiver every time you have turnaround. There's a lot of things involved in these calculations. And I mean, time to productivity, what's the staff, the onboarding, are you doing some sort of a sign-on bonus? All of these things factor into that $2,600 number. And in my own experience working with my own clients, that number ranges greatly depending on whether you're Medicaid or government payer source or private pay. And I've seen agencies that do great and are able to keep that cost per caregiver turnover right around the six to $800 mark. And I've seen people really have a bad retention problem and a lot of overhead, especially when it comes to advertising, things of that nature for recruitment. And those numbers hit $4,500 to $4,800 per caregiver. All right, so this is something that really needs to be looked at. Take a look inside your own organization, see what are your numbers. Are you familiar with them? Go ahead. So a big part of retention, as we mentioned before, it's got to do with understanding the needs. All right, and this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have some of the basic things, the physiological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. All of these things become more baseline or go and rise in importance to keeping your employees. Some of them are simple to take care of. Like, can you go ahead? The physiological needs, that's simple. They are there just like everyone else that goes to work every day because they have need to earn income in order to provide food, clothing, and shelter. As long as you're putting out there and you're keeping a competitive wage, you're keeping the information, you're showing the value, and you're not just blending in with the crowd, people will understand why it is they need to come and work with you. Taking care of the basic needs, showing them that, hey, you can earn a living with us. We have enough hours, and that's a big one. We're going to keep you working. We're not just going to give you 12 hours a week and then go on your merry way. And this is where companies like Augusta really come into play, and they can help reach and communicate all of these needs to potential caregivers. All right. The next on the hierarchy here is their safety needs. Okay, so let's talk about the obvious. How are you keeping your caregivers safe? Are you providing personal protective equipment? Basic things, gloves, some sort of hand sanitizer, maybe the gowns, the caps, the masks, if there's a need for it, or if they're are you assuring your caregivers are vaccinated? All of the normal safety things, proper training. But what about the other end of it, the part that people really don't talk about a lot? What do your internal policies and procedures look like? How are you, shaping your culture? How are you shaping either your operational procedures, everything to make sure that your caregivers not only are safe physically, but feel protected by the agency? Do you have an investigative process? Do you have some sort of a process that if a client makes an accusation of a caregiver, do you have a process of what happens? What is your internal staff supposed to do if the caregiver gets hurt? All of these things go to building that security blanket and that net that people will need in order to feel comfortable, safe, and protected while working for you, which leads us to the next rung on the hierarchy here. And that's belonging. Okay, so when we talk about belonging, we're talking about acceptance, recognition, support. So I think that comes into play right away. How are you communicating to your potential caregivers? Come join us, be part of our team, be part of our family, flexible scheduling, all of this, all the normal stuff that everybody blends in on. And this is something that I think Jen will be able to talk about more, especially when we're talking about how to communicate, how to reach out to them and really communicate your ability to recognize the support, to accept them, and to use that as a recruitment tool. But when it comes to the process of retaining caregivers, what are you doing to actually make them feel part of your family? We're going to talk about a few specific methods, but one of the big things that I tend to notice that a lot of caregiver agencies do is they don't really monitor that in-group, out-group behavior. And we'll get into more detail on that down the road. Jen, what would you like to share about this?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned that building your culture into even the very, very top of the funnel when you're recruiting caregivers is incredibly important. So what I mean by that is literally showcasing who your caregivers and clients are, obviously with permission to use their pictures and things like that. But promoting those types of things on in your job postings, so that way literally the caregiver who's applying for this job can see off the bat, these are the types of people that I'm going to work with. This is what it looks like to do this job. That immediately at the very, very highest level of your funnel or for caregivers immediately starts to foster that sense of belonging. That this isn't, I don't know about you all, but if you look on Indeed, every caregiver job posting looks the exact same, to be honest. That's why caregivers spam apply to jobs. They're just applying to 15 caregiving positions at once because they all, maybe one's offering $1 more an hour or something like that. But they don't really get an opportunity to know your agency or trust your agency. So when you incorporate a sense of belonging and culture and what your expectations are for caregivers, that you're going to be a part of a team that's compassionate and reliable, just like this one that you're actually seeing a real picture of or a real video of. Now that is something that is meaningful. And at Augusta, we find that caregivers applying to our job postings are spam applying a lot less than what we're seeing on Indeed. For instance, in June, we got about 200 applications for our customers, and 50% of them were qualified for an interview. That's significantly higher than what you're going to get on Indeed, for instance. So yeah, anything else to add on that, Julio?
No, and the other thing is that once you actually reach out to them and they actually start coming into your office, that's where you really want to start to foster that acceptance, that whole feeling. It becomes, again, it starts at the beginning. From the moment that application comes in, how are they being treated during the interview? How are they being treated during onboarding? There's a lot of factors that go into play, but your entire onboarding and hiring process really needs to be built around making people feel they belong. When we're talking about, caregivers, there's a wide range group. Caregivers in some states start as young as 16. I've seen caregivers that, I mean, just to make a joke here, not ageist, just a joke, but I've seen caregivers that need a caregiver try to come in and apply for a job, and all of this, this big wide range, how are people treating them? Is that 16-year-old that just finished some sort of caregiver training as part of a vocational program in high school, is he or she being made to feel as welcome and important part of your team as that other caregiver that's been with your company for 3 or 4 years? Is that caregiver that might look like they need a caregiver themselves, are you making them feel welcome and useful and a part of your team as much as you are that other caregiver that's been with your team for a couple of years? It's not necessarily, about giving them the best cases or giving them it's not about that. It's about making them feel welcomed, valued, and recognized. And if you can develop that from the moment your ad goes out, make them understand that from the moment that they sit there and they get that response from your application, from when they come in to do the interview, from when they're onboarding, all the way through to however long, that 3 to 5 clients that your average caregiver will work for you, you're going to be able to see marked improvements in your retention and your overall profits. Let's be realistic. Okay, go ahead. Now, esteem. Esteem is another big part. This is what makes us feel like we belong. What opportunities are you offering? Do you have in place some sort of employee of the month? Do you have in place some sort of recognition, employee of the month, employee of the quarter, things of that nature? Are you sending out a newsletter? Now, bringing it to the recruitment side of it, are you doing social media posts of your caregivers? Are you actively promoting them, making them feel like important to your agency? Are you making them feel important to themselves? Here's the thing. We live in a very social world, okay? But not real social, that artificial social that is, Facebook and Indeed and, Twitter and all of this other stuff, TikTok famous. Everybody wants to be TikTok famous nowadays. So why not give your caregivers something to be proud of? If you made them come in for training, give them some sort of certificate. If they did something great, post about it. If they're doing a great job with your client, and of course, again, let's follow HIPAA regulations, make sure we have permission for everything. Talk about this stuff, post, show pictures, make them feel important. Other people will see that they're feeling important, and this is going to help your marketing. It's going to help your recruitment. It's going to help a lot of different aspects of it. Jen, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, I just can't say enough about how putting out, even if it doesn't, I think a lot of home care agencies that I've talked with seem to struggle with how do I actually even leverage social media to be able to get caregivers, because they think I think people have a preconceived notion that they need to put out their content, like super special content that's going to be amazing for people. If somebody could only see like this amazing thing that we did. Um, I really think when we're talking about esteem and generating that self-actualization of for a caregiver, it comes down to the little things. And I think it's more about consistency and praising those small things every single day, every single week, every single month, than once a year doing a big thing. I think that's something that's really become apparent to me in all the agencies that I've talked with, and in talking with the caregivers that I interview all the time. Is it's the little things that make them feel that sense of esteem. So a caregiver of the month is a great thing to put on your social media, but I would, if you're posting on Facebook, at least once a week, um, like something that recognizes your caregivers, I think would be more in line with what I've seen that agencies are being successful at, in terms of generating that esteem of caregivers and really lifting up the employees that you have, to help them help you get more employees. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a little goes a long way, definitely. And if you're gonna have, if you want to build up the esteem of your caregivers, you really want to make sure that you're consistent, you're constantly recognizing them, that they feel that when they do something right. There was an expression that we used to use in the military a lot: you praise in public, you punish in private. And you really want to apply that in your home care agency. If your caregivers are doing good, make a lot of noise, do a lot of promotion about this, make people understand that when they do right, you're going to do right by them. All right, so that all will lead us to self-actualization. All right, so when we're talking about the self-actualization piece, what are you doing to make them feel fulfilled? Now, we've made them feel good about themselves, but what makes it worthwhile to come to work? Why do I, as a caregiver, why would I want to stay with you for the long term? You're going to do this by offering them training, career advancement. It's not a huge thing. One of the complaints I used to hear a lot, from when I used to work directly in the field with caregivers, is that, I've been at this agency 4 or 5 years, 3 years, 4 years. I've never gotten a raise, because most of the time, until the prices went up, a raise wasn't given. So I don't know why I'm saying here. And this is why there was for a long time, and I'm sure it's still seen, caregivers will leave you for a nickel, okay? Because they're trying to find a way to get ahead, to be a little bit more upwardly mobile, but there's no real incentive. You can offer incentive. It doesn't always have to mean more money per hour. Training, maybe the opportunity to move into a mentorship role or into a supervision role, some sort of role where they feel like they are moving, they are not just stuck. Okay, and it's not just, it doesn't always have to be this big extravagant, oh look, today you are, you're a caregiver, and now tomorrow you're managing a team of 40 caregivers. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. We all know that your caregiver isn't necessarily going to make 100 grand a year working for you, but they have to feel that their efforts are being valued. Don't just make them do the mandatory in-service. Offer an additional training, simple webinar, have them come in for an hour and give them a certificate. Give them something that they can show for themselves that, hey, I'm doing something to better myself. Or look, I've earned 10 of these certificates throughout the course of the year. Maybe I get an extra paid day off, an extra day of PTO, something, but it's something that makes it worthwhile, that shows that they're not just going to be doing grunt work for the rest of their life, and that there is no active, open appreciation for them. I've had clients where we've implemented just small things like a lead. You have a number of clients, or you're doing staffing in a facility. You take one of your better, more responsible and caregivers that have shown they're capable. You pay them an extra 50 cents an hour, 75 cents an hour. You make them the lead, the person responsible for that. Everybody signed in, signed out, that the shift was done, and somebody to go between them and the nursing staff and your office. It's a small bump up in responsibility for them. But if you give it to the right caregiver, it breeds loyalty, and it would breed, that ambition in the other caregivers of, oh, this company is worth staying with because there's opportunity for me to grow professionally, grow as a person. I can become the individual that I was always hoping to be, even on a small scale. Now, when it comes to recruiting, this is more on Jen's world there, but I would imagine promoting this and letting people know is definitely going to be something that will help.
Absolutely. I mean, pretty much all of these um, uh, levels of psychological need are excellent excellent things to make sure that your whole world knows about. It's not just you sharing it only with the caregivers that are on your team now and your office staff. It's making sure that it's out there as much as possible, and you're casting as wide of a net as possible to help people understand that, yeah, there are ways to grow in this career. Because I know I talk to a lot of caregivers, and I think they think that they have to move to another agency to be able to get more. Oh, I mean, the Julio touched on it. I mean, one of the main things that we see caregivers wanting is a full-time set of hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they think that they have to go to a whole bunch of different agencies, whereas I think one of the key things here is asking caregivers what they individually. I mean, having a system for training and career advancement and mentorship, I think those are important programs to have in place in your business. And then getting to know your caregivers and going back to how you treat them, really asking them, what is it that you want to do? Like, you love being a caregiver for these reasons. What else do you want to do? And maybe there's not always a systematic program, but maybe there's something that you can incorporate into that specific caregiver's into their work specifically to help them with that and give them that experience on their resume that they might be looking for. And when you hear them talking about additional education, either helping to provide that or nurturing that ambition with them, I think can go a really, really long way. And I mean, it ties back to praise and recognition. When you see somebody doing something good, I mean, say it to them and be public about it, you know. But I love to see, and that it's content that does really, really well on social media. When you have a lot of people holding up a training certificate, that is a wonderful thing on social media. It really is a clear identifier of the type of person that you want to attract to your business and what they get when they work with you. So that's the type of thing that can really amp up what's your Facebook presence in particular to attract the right people. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get down to the brass tacks here. So what are some key strategies that I have found, in my experience, that can help, it can really help with your retention and ultimately your recruitment? So the first thing I really want to hone in on is having clear expectations. So you're putting out there, you've worked on the why. What is your why? You have your hero story. You've built this out, you incorporate it into your ads. You've got this clear strategy, as to what your ads are going to look like. How are you going to stand out on, and not just get drowned out in the noise of Indeed and ZipRecruiter and all these other platforms. So now that you've gotten them into the office, they're going to come in, they've filled out their application, they're ready for the interview, or they're ready to onboard, and you've got them in front of you. What is it that they can expect from working with you? One of the this client that I worked with a few years ago, he had one of the best strategies for retention. And I got to tell you, probably one of the lowest caregiver turnover rates for a number of reasons that I've ever experienced coming into work with a client. I wasn't there to work with him on retention, obviously, but I was there for other reasons. And he had these big foam boards on in the waiting room where the caregivers were, and they were larger than life. He called them his 10 commandments. All right. And it was one of the boards had the 10 things that were unforgivable that he expected out of every one of his caregivers. Things, it's for him, it was things like, you know, um, be punctual, don't use your cell phone, client first, don't abandon your client, call the office. 10 very specific things. And that's important. But what really became the value that was the second sign that he had up, it's what can the caregivers expect from his office staff and him. Things like we promise that we'll investigate all accusations. We won't just blindly believe the client. We won't just blindly believe the caregiver. That just because a client made an accusation, it wouldn't guarantee them being out of a job. One of the 10 commandments that were unforgivable for his office staff is that all caregivers must be treated with respect. Okay, not that they're going to bow down to them, but that they will be spoken to professionally and kindly, no matter what was going on. And I have seen that man hold true to all of his beliefs. And there was a list, there was 10 of each. All right. And the consistency that he showed his staff and his caregivers is what really drove home the loyalty he fostered in all his staff. That this individual had about 150 caregivers working for him at any given moment. And at the time I met him, the majority of his caregivers were working for him for 3 years or more, because he said something was going to happen and he would do it. He would equally reprimand a office member for violating the rules against the caregivers as he would for the caregivers for violating the rules against the client. And that consistency, those clear expectations carried out, and it caused a really low turnover. And while somebody doesn't have to be as specific or as detailed as that, having clear expectations and consistency in how you're running your business and how you're dealing with your caregivers, it really moves the needle in the right direction for you. It gives you, it backs up and validates everything you're putting in your advertising to get them in the door. And it doesn't make you look like you're, full of unpleasantness. Okay. The next really big key strategy here, I mentioned it briefly in the beginning. You got to keep an eye out for clicks, that in-group, out-group behavior. All right, for people that may not know what I'm talking about when I say clicks or in-group and out-group, it's very simple. Remember back in high school, you had your jocks, you had your nerds, you had your cheerleaders, you had your smart kids. Those are cliques. Okay, and this happens in all aspects of our lives, including the workplace. And many times, anyone who's had a home care agency for more than 20 minutes and has had more than 3 caregivers and 1 scheduler will know or will have heard, I really like so-and-so. They always show up. Oh, I wouldn't put this person with a coma patient, and they all classify in their minds who the good caregivers are versus the not so good caregivers. And then you end up with this entire pool of in between that gets lost in this shuffle. As an owner, as a manager, one of your jobs should be to monitor that and to make sure it doesn't happen. Make sure that all of your caregivers are being communicated with. And this goes back to belonging, that feeling of belonging. I will never promote you as an agency as a good place to work if your staff is not making me feel welcomed. Okay. That's the second big strategy here. And then the other one, we've talked it to death in this presentation, praise often, share exceptional performance. We'll repeat it 100 more times. You cannot stress this enough. I definitely can't. I know Jen is on board with me on this. If your caregivers are doing well, if your office is performing well, make it known. People need to know you're a good place to work. People need to know that you're a decent human being that has similar passion and interest and drive to work with the clients that you expect your caregivers to work with. If they don't see it in you, they won't replicate it. They won't believe in your vision. They won't believe in what you're trying to do. And they won't stay with you as long as you want. And at the end of the day, this comes down to one thing. We're all in business to make money no matter how much we love people. Okay. And high caregiver turnover, that cost per caregiver lifetime value reduces. If your caregivers aren't staying with you more than 2 or 3 clients, then you've got a retention problem. And if ultimately that will turn into a profitability problem. Anything you'd like to add, Jen?
I think you nailed it.
All right. All right. And all of these strategies that we just finished talking about are going to do the most important thing, and it's going to encourage cheerleaders. All right. Word of mouth will grow your business. There's, my company is built on one very simple philosophy. People build relationships, and those relationships are what's going to drive your business forward. Okay. This is just as important with your caregiver staff as it is with your internal office staff, as it is with your referral partners, as it is with your clients. If you have good systems in place, if you have a solid recruitment strategy, you have a solid retention strategy, all of this will compound on itself to where your cost of recruitment will go down significantly because your caregivers will be your biggest voice out there. Come work for here. Come work for us. This company is fantastic. They do a lot of good things for you. And I know this to be 100% a fact because my wife was a caregiver for like 15 years. For a lot of our marriage, I used to have just my house full of caregivers all the time. And I used to hear it. Oh yeah, I'm thinking about applying at such and such agency. No, don't go there. The schedulers there, they have their favorites. And if you're not one of the favorites, you don't get a case. Or don't go, or yeah, you know what, this agency, they treat you really good and they've been, you want to go apply here. Or hey, I've been at such and such agency for the last 6 7 years. Oh, they must be good because you're still there for after 6 years. And that type of word of mouth, it's a small community. Word travels fast. And if you're doing right by them, they will, even if they're not trying, they will do right by you.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And we see it on social media as well. When those cheerleaders are encouraged, they tag people, their friends, in information and pictures of your company on Facebook. I see it all the time. Some of our customers are getting thousands of engagements on Facebook, and a lot of it is caregivers sharing great posts with other caregivers, and they just tag their friend and say, hey, look over here, look at this agency. And then the expectation is set really clearly right there where they can see, oh wow, this looks like a great team of caregivers, and they're doing training, and I can see the caregiver of the month or the caregiver of the week even in the business, in the business's Facebook page right away. So yeah, encouraging those cheerleaders, I mean, that's what it's all about, because you are always going to have those people who are ready, willing, and able to help refer your business to other caregivers and to even clients. So
Right. And look, at the end of the day, one loud voice that's against you is very powerful. But if you have 100 voices that are saying you're great, that will drown out that one negative voice 100% of the time.
mm-hmm.
All right. So this is our brief presentation. We're willing to take any questions anybody have. I think you guys have the ability to turn off your microphones, or if you're a little shy, you can put it into the chat down below. And anybody have any questions on recruitment, retention, strategy that you would like for us to discuss? Social media. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Please.
For those that are like, not all caregivers are like, let's say on Facebook or on social media.
Mhm.
What other ways can you recognize them publicly? Like other than, send, I don't know, an email to everybody, but, I mean, how else can they feel publicly recognized?
Okay. One of the strategies that I like personally is email marketing campaigns. As an addition to, if you have an email marketing campaign set up specifically for your caregivers and for your clients, do like a company newsletter every month or twice a month, however often it is your particular agency is going to do it. Talk a little bit about what's going on and highlight these achievements to the caregivers. But if I'm not mistaken, Jen I'll defer to her on this momentarily, but even if they're not actively on social media, you still want to promote that they're doing something good, just simply because it'll grab other people's attention. It's a recruitment strategy, not necessarily a promotion of that one particular caregiver.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That definitely, I agree. And yeah, and I do that, but I was more, kind of my question was like, so they know that they've been recognized.
Yeah.
So.
But email marketing works great. Works great for that. That's one of the things. And another strategy that, it also depends on how the age group of your caregiver pool could affect this a lot. For example, some agencies have a slightly older caregiver pool, 40 to 50, age range as the bulk of their caregivers. They're not really on social media as often as maybe somebody a little bit younger. So what they do plan is get-togethers at least quarterly, kind of like an ongoing all-day thing they make it an event. Hey, listen, we thank you so much. We also want to recognize, in combination with the Facebook, in combination with the email marketing. Other agencies I've seen put in place the monthly or quarterly newsletter that goes out via email and on paper along with the pay stubs. Okay. Those are a number of different ways to get the word out on who's doing what and really show that you care about your caregivers.
Yeah. And I would add, make sure it's on your website and a caregiver hall of fame in your office. Those types of things I've seen work well in the past too. So.
Right. All right. So
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. And Alexandria Edwards typed in, other than Indeed, what is a good platform? Well, I'm not the biggest fan of Indeed or ZipRecruiter. All right. Those are the two top ones out there right now. I like the KISS method. Keep it simple. Have a portal for people to apply on your website. Use techniques that we've talked about, especially, social media is a good solid way to do this. Really honing in, getting that word of mouth spread. I'm sure Jen has better stats on this than I do, but I have found that money spent on promoting Indeed ads, it's really become expensive and you really get drowned out. And you can spend about a third of that much on a well-structured social media designed campaign and get probably about 5 times the result, and more qualified at that.
Yeah, I mean, Alexandria, so that is exactly what Augusta does. So today we're a pretty new company. So we recruit caregivers directly from social media and get them to apply to your jobs. And we do it with better results and at a fraction of the cost of Indeed. Long term, Augusta is building our own software platform to be able to rival Indeed. Hopefully, that's our big grand vision. But today we use Facebook just to source caregivers for you. So I'm happy to chat with you after this if you would like to learn a little bit more about exactly how we do it. So.
Yeah, I will like to get that too with you and learn how you're doing it.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can set up some time after this. Awesome, thank you.
Do you want me to put my contact information on the chat?
I'll pass it along to her, Jessica.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Julio.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is, like I said, I personally, I mean, beyond anything, I've always been a big proponent because in my experience, I have found that caregivers spend a lot of time on things like Facebook, Instagram, so on and so forth. So even before I met the team over at Augusta, which I got to tell you, I've referred a number of people to them, and I've
Thank you.
never had a complaint. So which is why we're doing this today, because they really do a good job. But just the results from it, just the ad spend alone, you can really, if you really hone in and target your people right and follow certain steps properly, you can make a big impact in your recruitment, because the reach is just phenomenally bigger than all the noise. I mean, there was a time in the Northeast in particular, a number of years ago, where Craigslist was the place to find your caregivers, and the noise on there got so out of hand that it became, a financial drain to run those ads on there, and you had to time it, and everything was just very complicated, because you would spend all this money to run an ad, and it would only really be good for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, because the noise was so bad. And unfortunately, this is what's happening on these large job board platforms. Snag a Job, you have ZipRecruiter, you have Indeed, yeah, I think Monster's still around, Glassdoor. There's a bunch of them out there, and every day there's more and more, but they all get drowned out. And one of the things is what Jen touched on earlier. It's a lot of noise. I you go down Indeed, and I guarantee you will scroll down, and from 3 different companies see almost exactly the same job title ad repeated over and over, and it just becomes complex.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right.
Any other final questions? We're starting to come up on the hour here, so yeah. And maybe one last question if anybody has one, and then we'll send everybody back to the rest of their day.
Yes, and we do appreciate you all being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How do you guys compete with the job market? Because we have a lot of Amazons popping up. I'm in Georgia, and so how can you compete with that price?
Do you want to, for recruitment, do you want to take this one? Because I actually have an answer for this.
I mean, I have my own thoughts. Maybe you can.
Go ahead.
So caregivers want a pay that is competitive, and that's totally understandable. I think the thing, though, is that there is a limited, from my perspective, there's a limited pool of professional caregivers today. And what we need to do as an industry, and what we're doing at Augusta, is trying to tap into a new pool of caregivers. So sometimes, yes, you will compete with the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world. But I think the really big opportunity here is to tap into the family caregivers. So maybe somebody who's wanting to work at Amazon is not necessarily a good fit for the agency, because I don't know, maybe they do have the right heart for it. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. But what we've seen a lot of success with is trying to get family caregivers to turn into professional caregivers, because what we specialize in doing is helping you attract those people who are interested in that type of work, where, like, working in a warehouse to them sounds, I mean, maybe I'll make a couple extra dollars an hour, but that work sounds hard or boring, or not something that I really care about. So I think striking on the meaning of this profession and the fact that it gives a little bit of a higher reward is really going to resonate with a certain audience. And that, in my experience with Augusta so far, is people who are already doing this work. They cared for their mom who had cancer. They care for their grandparent. And those are the types of people we're trying to pull into the industry. Because there's 53 million family caregivers out there. I mean, it's a huge, huge pool. So yeah, I don't know. That's my perspective on Alexandria, your awesome question. Julio, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I actually am gonna repeat some of what you already said. So the reality is, and I agree with Jen on this, you need to find people that have a passion for this. Okay, I talked a little bit about this before. What's your hero story? Okay, so to speak. All right. So number one, you have to be clear about why is it that you do this. All right, because that's going to carry along. If you're in it for the money, that's great. I'm not knocking it. There's a lot of very successful agencies that the owners are in it for the money. I've worked with many of them, but somebody on your staff actually has to have a passion for what you're doing. Okay. Now, the other side of this is you have to be able to target who you're looking for. Okay, and this is going to depend on a number of factors. All right. Number one, are you a government payer source or are you private pay? And if you can, feel free to reach out to me. And I'll happily walk you through this. I'll give you no obligation, no cost, session so that I can explain this in more detail. But who are you looking for people to work for private pay clients, or are you looking for people to work for government payer source? That, because they actually are two distinctly different types of people that you're going to look for demographically. Which brings me to my next point. How familiar are you with the demographic makeup of the community at large? How far do your caregivers that you're trying to find potentially live from the clients? Especially in today with gas prices and inflation the way it is very important to know this. All right, because the more complex it is for the client, for the caregiver to get to the client, the more complicated it is for you to find somebody to actually go service this client. So all of this goes into play. Age group, when you're looking at the demographic makeup of a private pay caregiver versus a government payer source caregiver, age actually is a huge factor. You have a little bit of overlap in the two, but for the most part, it's going to really affect your targeting, and how you create these ads. And then all of this stuff, how you're promoting, where you're advertising, what neighborhoods, all of this stuff goes into play. And this is all information that on the back end of things, companies like Augusta really work with, because they have this clear understanding of what people are looking for, and it expands it out and makes it a lot easier to manage. So there's a lot of factors. Like I said, if you're interested in having a conversation about this, I said it's no obligation or anything. I just don't have the time to get into what you really need to look for over here.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for the question, Alexandria. And so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you so much to Julio for sharing some of your knowledge with us. I mean, he's got so much experience in this industry, and it's just awesome to be able to share the stage with you. And I can't recommend his company enough if you are not already in conversation with him, having a chat with him to see how he can help you bolster your recruitment and retention strategies and really strategize about your business in general. So thank you so much again, Julio. You are awesome. And thanks for joining everyone.
All right, so give me 1 minute before we log off, and here we go. I just posted into the chat my email if you want to reach out to me and set up a time. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Julio.
All right.
Have a great one.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Good luck.
everybody.